Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another developer meetup from Orkes Conductor. It's super cool to be here. We're doing these, trying to get these done monthly and bringing some really interesting topics to you. But before we get into any of that stuff, I just wanted to say that if you are new to the stream, so we do these every month. The idea is to bring together people from our open source community and other parts of the community, bring in members of Orkes engineering in the back end to talk about things that are really important to the business, to workflows in general, the building of them, best practices, and kind of just get into the weeds of why we do the things that we do as developers, why we build apps the way that we do, and then places where Conductor and as a workflow orchestrator can really make that work even better for you and help you develop apps a lot faster. And on today's show, we're going to be talking a lot about AI. The whole show is going to be about AI and agents and how that plays with the idea of using workflow orchestration compared to maybe some of the other tooling that you're used to using when you're building out or integrating AI into your application. So it's really exciting. A couple bits of news, just so you're aware. We did a couple updates to the homepage of Orkes.io the other day. I think that released yesterday. So go check it out if you haven't seen those yet. I actually just got back from a town called Waterloo, just outside Toronto, Ontario, Canada, from a hackathon called Hack Canada. Orkes as an organization, we love to sponsor hackathons globally because it brings together usually a lot of younger people who have new and interesting creative ways to develop apps and solve interesting problems. And then when we bring in something like Orkes and Conductor that makes them developing their apps just so much easier, they can spend that 36 hours or 48 hours just focused on the architecture and not thinking about how they need to build all the platformy stuff to get it to even work and all these intricate things. They can just focus on what their core code needs to do. And it's really important. Huge thanks to the teams in Canada that participated at Laurier University in Waterloo. It was super cool. And the winners of the Orkes track, the Musketeers, made this really, really neat project that has to do with giving back to Canadians, specifically those who struggle with food and don't have the resources necessary to feed their families. It's a great project. We're going to share more about that on our socials here pretty quick, but we just wanted to let you all know that if you're interested, if you're running a hackathon, things of that nature, reach out to us directly, either on LinkedIn. You can email me, and I'm happy to talk more with you about how we can participate. So without further ado, let's go ahead and meet our guests and get started on talking about these things. All right. I will let them introduce themselves, but Dan, would you mind going first?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Dan Miller. So I spoke on here not too long ago. I'm a tech lead for a company called First Data Bank in the UK, software developer by trade, I guess, and general geek and all things technology. So I love Conductor. Been engaged with the community for a while now, I think, a little while anyway. Just love it. I think it's awesome. It's a great tool.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, man. This is like your second or third time now? Is it second or third? I don't remember.
Yeah.
Second, something like
third,
that.
Maybe. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
No, it's awesome to have you, man. Thank you for joining us again. You've got FDB specifically has a really interesting set of use cases for its workflows and for using Conductor, and so I've always been fascinated, and I can't wait to see kind of what you want to share today. Ram, do you mind giving an intro, please?
Hi, I'm Ram. I run AI at Orkes, and it's super exciting to see how far we have come since I started learning about AI and all this fun stuff. And look forward to seeing all the nice things Dan has to bring up, and hope we have a good discussion that's helpful for the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for being here. And I think that's an important place to start is, if you don't mind, if we want to get into a little bit of like, AI is obviously the hotness for everybody right now. It's not just right now. It's been like, it has been the topic du jour of every Substack and Hacker News feed now for probably months, if not a year or more. And I find it interesting, and I talk to a lot of people in my previous places I've been at and communities I'm a part of, and the conversation around what AI is and how it's used, and then specifically when it comes to app development, what that actually means. I think it's wide and vast, and it's not understood terribly well. Would you mind giving kind of your perspective on what it means to incorporate AI just kind of generally into app development, like as a process, as a mindset, and then kind of pivoting that into what does that kind of look for your actual application flows?
Okay, so let's take this through the software development lifecycle, right? So when you start with an idea, you figure out a way to get that idea into a product, you map it out to specific development process steps, actions that you need to take. This is going to be a stack I'll use. This is for the database. This is for the server. This is for the front end app or whatever, right? So on. The traditional mentality has been that you have these functionality that you have to code yourself. All the logic is something you bring to bear. Even if it's doing a simple thing as making a binary choice, should it take this option or that option, that's something you would code it in explicitly yourself, right? But now things have changed. uh, you can, just like you sub out to a library, have it do some of the work for you. You sub out to an external model, you sub out to an external service, and they're able to do much more than what we as humans can proactively code and develop. You have both the parametric knowledge, which is the trillions of tokens that these models are trained on and fine tuned on, and so on, and specific contextual knowledge that you can provide that is specific to your app. So the possibilities are limitless. And we are seeing that, right? Many of the apps we see that are AI enabled. Uh, so that's the first thing, where the functionality you want to offer through an app uh, becomes much more easier for you to make happen. And it's also much more capable and powerful. You can dream of and think of much more capable things. Now, this taking a step back there. Now, this is from you to the user. You have an idea. Now, you made it happen real fast. But take one step back. Instead of you coding, you can have an assistant code for you. Instead of you having to manage all the infrastructure, you can do serverless, you can do all these things, right? Similarly, if you have multiple services and multiple components in your solution, you can use an orchestration solution like Conductor that Orkes offers. And it's effectively abstracting out the complexity of multiple interacting components, their dependencies, and so on. And the whole process is much simpler now. So b- the world of dealing with complexity has advanced so much, and we have access to much more complex and powerful, featureful tools to get our ideas into functional solutions that end users can benefit from. So we are in the golden age, man. We are in the golden age for this.
I, I like the way that you were explaining, kind of getting into it there. One of the things I noticed at the hackathon, talking to younger people who have not encountered, the idea of building out workflows. They are actively doing it. They have to design something, they have to build it out, they have to make all these interactions happen, but they don't think about it in that context. And so some of them, as I'm trying to explain to them, like, here's how you build this out. This is what the purpose of it is. The ones who, as much on me for how I explain or not. The students who got it, like, oh wow, realized very quickly and almost immediately were able to incorporate, like, they were like, wow, I don't have, there's like, you just saved me like 50% of the development work I thought I was going to have to build out to write all these other little tasks to do various things, because I don't have to do that anymore. Like, I just build out the flow, the things, these different tasks are just there. whatever that flow looks like, and it just goes and happens, and then I can go ahead and actually spend time on the real code that does the real interesting part of my application. And I think that's what's so important about this concept. But also, like you said, when it comes to AI in general, the hard part about so much of this is trying to incorporate it not just like architecturally, like what is it doing for you, but how do you then integrate it into the app so it's not just like, look, I bolted on something, I bolted in a service, like it's actually doing something for you. I don't know, Dan, how does this kind of resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that's kind of like, struck us when, we've kind of embarked on our AI journey. And I think there's a lot of companies that are on this similar sort of trajectory, right? They're all this stuff is happening. I think we're getting to that point of critical mass, if you will, that the libraries, the tools, the stacks, they're starting to hit that maturity that enterprise can now start engaging with these things in a sort of realistic fashion without it being too bleeding edge. And very, very quickly, we found that how you manage that and how you scale those things is a significant challenge. And we found that what an orchestrator brings to the party is that management of that type of um, that type of challenge, right? That if you've got services, if you've got AIs, it's a very I see it very similar to that sort of microservice type paradigm. That if you've got these components, how you manage them and how you integrate them with everything else that you've got going on um, is a massive part of bringing AI effectively to your solutions and to your software. And I think having looking at our journey so far, being able to just quickly scaffold a workflow that calls a couple of microservices, runs a couple of processes, but then interleaves with an AI. An AI is able to contribute, whether it's contributing to content or decision making or um, looking at what other processes might be necessary or running different processes based on those inputs. It's really powerful just to be able to just chuck those things together. I know it sounds like really, really simplistic, but I love the fact that we've been able to just say, okay, we're going to wire this thing up, and automatically you've got failover, you've got fallback, you've got retries, you've got interconnection with your services, and you've got security in there as well, and it just ticks loads and loads of boxes, but allows you to innovate at the same time. And it just changes that developer experience, really changes it to be a much more productive, in my opinion, process.
It, sorry. What you get me thinking, and kind of what you're leading to in your description there is one of the questions I'd kind of written down to kind of to prod into a little bit is the idea that it's really easy. Like when I worked in the networking industry, route switch for a long time, and the idea of automating using developer tools became a big deal 6-7 years ago. Makes lots of sense. There's automate away the stuff that you do repeatably. That's what software development's all about. At its core, that's really what it's all about. But something that has become much more apparent with AI, any generative AI people use or bot that people use, is sort of what you were alluding to, Dan. The idea that you can simplify a lot of the things that you do, even more so as a developer, that you repeat on a regular basis, or that your app repeats on a regular basis, without even having to write that bit of it, because an AI potentially can do it for you.
Yeah.
And before we kind of get into the idea of like what the AI can do, or an agent potentially can do for the app, I'd love to kind of get both your take as developers on, if you're just a staff developer someplace doing your job and trying to incorporate, artificial intelligence in some way into the workflow you do. How do you both see it, like today and in the future, affecting like those tasks and just like actual workflows that you go through as a developer and in that role?
Let me take a quick stab at it. So, one is AI is a very broad term. There are almost an infinite number of possibilities for models. So when people integrate AI into a workflow or into an app, it's not like one thing that everybody is doing. Each team, each project is incorporating some AI enabled technology that suits their specific purpose into their project, into their product. So some of that does need to be taken into account when talking about the effect or the overall impact of having AI. The other part is, despite that, there are many common attributes like the complexity involved, like the fail safes that need to be put in, the retries that are more necessary than before. Is it a local model? Are you talking to something over the network? These kinds of things are common with any service, AI or not. They just become much more prevalent now because more people are adopting this technology in more places that were not done before. So that makes it more interesting too. Having said that, the the bar for entry is much lower now than it was before. So, like you were mentioning, students are able to build pretty interesting apps nowadays based on just a brief, and they get everything quickly. So more and more people are trying things out. So we are in a phase where whether you're a staff engineer or any anywhere on the totem pole, all of us have access to the same information, and how we go about using it is all about best practices and what you bring to the table that's not already out there. Yeah, would love to hear from you, Dan.
Yeah, I think just reflecting on perhaps more the developer side of it. Um, I think it's going to be a really interesting sort of period. I mean, Ram, you mentioned like the golden age, right? It's everything. It's like almost like all the options are there, right? There's so many things we can do. We're kind of almost like startled rabbits a little bit at the moment. I think, particularly in the developer space, it's like, well, what do we do with this? Um, and I definitely see this as a bit of like it's almost like an extension of what we've done with like CI, right, and CD and those technologies. Like the opportunity, I think, for us as a development team and a development community is obviously there's the customer facing stuff, there's the production stuff, there's things we can do with apps and tools and whatever. But I think there's also the what can we do with our stack? You know, what can we do with our delivery processes or our development processes? How can this ability to have a sea of minions there that can do tasks for us, can do things, how can that shape? What is that going to present us and change for us? And I think there's it's hard to understand. I think it's hard to contextualize. I think there's some obvious things. There's things like our testing and our I'm always banging on about testing and validation and things like that. But I think there's a huge opportunity there where we can just do it at a scale that was never really feasible humanly in the past. And I think things like triaging bugs, analyzing faults and failures, analyzing logs, and monitoring services. There's just a whole wealth there that you can, if you can integrate AI into that development process and that development stack, it's going to have such an awesome I mean, wearing my laziness cap, right? I hate doing repetitive tasks. I hate trawling logs. So I'm like, as soon as I can get an AI into that thing, I'm going to be there.
It's super
Yeah.
funny that you mentioned that last part, Dan, because I mean it's exactly how I feel too. Like doing the same thing over and over again just drives me bananas. I think it's part of the reason why, or part of the output of having ADHD, at least in my case, where I'm always looking for a new hobby. I've got to be trying something different. If I had to do the same thing repetitively, I'm like, okay, I can't do this anymore. And it's interesting because one of the students, I'm kind of pulling back on this weekend a lot because it's like fresh in my mind. One of the students asked me on Saturday. I was there all day on Saturday. The hackathon went from like Friday evening to early Sunday morning. So I spent all day there Saturday just to being around to mentor or guide or provide any feedback or support on how to use Conductor and incorporate it. And somebody came over to me as they were eating. They were like, "Can I just ask you a question?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "Do you think there's really a career still to be had in software development, especially like should I be doing a comp sci program, like especially with AIs and stuff?" And I'm like, "Okay, hold on." Try not to get on my soapbox too much, but my answer to them was kind of along the lines of what you said. I'm like, yes, there's 100% like a career to be had and a path to be had, but it's not simply because these are great skills to have. I think they are, but I'm like, first off, being an engineer in any way, shape, or form, going to like learning how to engineer something, whether you have a degree or not, doesn't matter, is so useful in understanding how systems work, just the idea of systems in general. So when you go to have conversations with people, like I'm not classically a developer, but I've been in doing DevRel type stuff for a while now. So when I talk with either of you, like, yeah, I'm not going to get into the weeds of like pair programming with either of you, but I understand what you're talking about, and we can have a conversation about this. And it helps. It makes a huge difference because you can figure these things out. And so as I was talking to this young person, this student at the university, I'm like, it's absolutely a good thing to get into when it comes to engineering. But then beyond that, actually in software development, the fun part about it isn't learning and memorizing repetitive constructs or memorizing commands or certain statements or whatever. You can Google that. I mean, you got ChatGPT. Like, you can use an AI and go figure out the answer to the question. Like, this is stuff that is known and you can find. The fun part about it is, how do you go creatively solve a problem? Like, what's the problem you want to solve? And then using what's up here to actually go figure that out. But then you just go grab a tool like Python or Java or I don't know, whatever language you want or model you want to inject to try to solve that problem creatively. I'm like, that's the cool part. And the young person was just kind of like, oh, okay, that's not what one of my mentors said to me. I'm like, I don't want to contradict your mentor, but I'm also going to tell you that like, like that person in my mind, like that person works at the university. No offense to anyone who does. This is not intended as shade, but also like as a practitioner and being in the world at technology companies, I'm like, I can tell you that like it's a thriving world and it's not going down anytime soon.
I think if you look at other industries that have had automation revolutions, right? I think if you look in the manufacturing industry, one that I kind of reflected on in the past, is where you had the introduction of CNC milling machines, right? You went from a person milling a component by hand to a computer able to do it with an automated program, and the immediate thing is you think, well, that's just going to be a load of people out of a job, and that's just the death of that as a career. And really, what actually has happened is the expectation of the world for those things just shifted. It shifted from one person being able to produce one part a day to one person able to produce 100 parts a day, which reduced all the price of those parts. The complexity of those parts could go up because they can create more detailed things. They can start doing more with those things. The cost of production and the reliability of things then goes up, and then you can generate more of those things. And I think that's we've seen the same thing in other spaces in the computing industry, again, like CI, CD, and test automation and things like that. They've changed what the expectation is, and I think we'll see the same thing. I think that expectation of being able to create innovative solutions quickly, responsively, and what the customer expects. They won't come to us and say, can you create this thing for me? And then 2 years later, you've got a product and it's on the market and it's engaged. No. They're going to expect it much quicker. And they're going to expect it to respond to those customer needs much, much quickly, and I think that's going to be really exciting, because like the geek inside of me is like, I get bored, after a little while, right? I love it when we create something and it's amazing and you get that buzz from someone engaging and they're like, oh, this is awesome. It's changing my life, whatever. And I think the more of I can see us just doing more of that. And yeah,
absolutely. Okay, so I want to get into some agentic and some really get into some specific AI things. But Ram, you look like you were about to jump in for a sec. Did I read that right? Did you want to chime in real quick?
So I just wanted to add a couple of thoughts to what you both were saying. So one is the rising tide effect, right? It lifts all boats. So now that we have this upswell in interest in the technology, a lot more people even peripheral to it will benefit from it. The other thing is that there's a distinction between being an engineer and being just a coder, right? Your ability to understand a whole system, come up with systems level solutions, design solutions to problems is one thing, and being able to translate that into something that works, which is a very essential skill, is a different skill. Both are not interchangeable. And both of these sit on one side while the product mind sits on the other side, right? So, on the one hand, you need somebody to be able to relate to a real world situation, find or identify an opportunity to improve something or solve a problem, and say, hey, this is a problem. I need this to be solved for these reasons. Then, that whether it's the same individual or someone else, goes and figures out a way to solve the problem, way to implement that solution and deliver it, make it available and all that. And then the whole 9 yards after that, right? Now, so
Yeah.
think of how when computers first started becoming more popular, you started thinking, can we use a computer for this particular task that they weren't being used for before? And every possible human endeavor got impacted by that, benefited from it. We are going through a similar phase. Every possible human endeavor, we are asking the question, can AI help me with this? Can AI make me do this better? And uh, taking that forward, as we keep applying AI more and more to more and more use cases, the technology, the models, they will also improve and be more capable for all those applications. And that will become a new substrate. 15 years down the line, what we are working so hard to understand and manage and set up, for them, it's table stakes.
Yeah, completely
They'll
agree.
just
Yeah.
have it accessible. Everything they build will be on top of that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Agreed. So
Yeah.
if you guys are good with it, I want to pivot a little bit and kind of get into the idea of agents in AI, and generally the topic of like workflows with agents or agentic workflows, however you want to refer to it. And Ram, I know we've had this conversation a couple times internally, and you're like, all right, hold on. Okay, give you everyone hang on a sec. And I mean that in the best possible way, because to your comment earlier about AI means a billion different things to a billion different people, and it doesn't just mean those things; it actually can be much of that, and so different and distinct in different ways. That I thought would be kind of interesting if you don't mind, kind of giving us a bit of everyone kind of a bit of a primer to kind of start us off a bit more on like what actually is an agent, and like as we get into the conversation of like agentic workflows or building out these actually practically building out integrations, like where should we really put our brains first before we get into that conversation?
Uh, all right, so I'll try to keep this succinct so we have a more lively discussion with questions and whatnot. But fundamentally, an agent must have agency, right? It has to be able to make decisions on its own. It has to be able to take actions and have outcomes on its own. So the capability of being able to execute actions and the capability of making those decisions of which actions to execute and how is what determines an agent. Something without that agency, I would not want to call it an agent, even though the same model might be being used for uh, both use cases. For example, you want an email drafted. We are doing this video stream, supposedly going to two different outlets. So if you want to send an update and you have something that can paraphrase it and send out to both outlets, that's it's an agent in the sense that it's doing something on your behalf, taking care of something for you, but nothing intelligent is going on. It's not making any smart decisions on its own. And you have pre-configured to a finite set of possibilities of what it needs to do. The workflow is static in that case, right? On the other hand, if you had something like ChatGPT by itself as a tool or Claude, when you interact with it, you're interacting with an entity that has infinite possibilities, right? In a sense, you could say that that service is an agent by itself. Uh, but it cannot actually execute actions on your behalf. You cannot go to chat.com today and ask it to, can you turn my sprinklers off please, and there's nothing it can do for you there. You need something to have the ability to execute actions and the ability to quote unquote think on its own and have that agency. And of course there are like many ways to dice this onion, but
Mhm.
that's a good start and we can roll from there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so no, having said that, and when you mentioned this internally to it in a conversation, you, myself, and one other person were having the other day, and to be fair, I had never heard it referred to that way. It was almost one of those topics that I knew it when I saw it, but I couldn't quite articulate it to someone else. Which it's your comment of an agent has agency. Like that statement was like, okay, that kind of like, it was almost like the glass breaking moment. Like once you see something, you can't unsee it now. It was kind of that moment, for me at least. And I want to get into, if you're both okay with it, I'd like to get into the idea of like, okay, now that we have an understanding of there are large language models, and we already have workflows and stuff published on Orkes.io. And I know, Dan, you've been doing a lot of work on your own on some AI centric workflows and apps you've been playing around with. What I'm curious about is there's the whole, to your point, Rob, there's a whole idea of like integrating a model of some kind, a small language or a large language model or some other feature like that to send a prompt to that replies back. There's some things like that. But as I understand it, that's not really agentic. That's just, it's a service. I'm requesting a response from a service and it brings back. It's a very powerful service, yes, but it's not, there's no agency that's happening. I'm requesting something in particular and I get a response back in an expected way. And so I'd be very curious to understand from both your perspectives. And Dan, maybe you can chime in a bit on some of the work you've been doing and how, like, some of the kind of labbing you've been playing around with about how you both see the idea of building out agents, what those flows kind of look like, and like how you think about it differently than simply just integrating a model of some other kind or whatever as like a service into your application.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going back to Ron, what you were saying. Um, it's that problem. It's understanding like what is this thing solving, and what is this? What is the purpose for this? Whatever it is we're creating, right? Um, and I think the big thing for me is that if you are able to bring AI into a workflow, and whether or not that thing's directly influencing that workflow, or if that thing is able to make decisions and take actions, based on the state of that workflow or the state of that process, or whatever. That's an incredibly powerful opportunity. You are able to autonomously start actioning things, based on whatever inputs have kind of been presented to it. And I think that at the moment I kind of feel a little bit that uh, although the stuff that I've been working on at the moment is a chatbot. The chatbots are almost kind of doing a slight disservice to some of these things, because what it's doing is it's kind of saying, well, everything's a chat interface, everything's you got to talk to this thing and it does some stuff for you. And I think there's actually a huge opportunity in this stuff operating on its own. Some of that's probably like a little bit scary, right? But where you can say, let's say, for instance, going back to my stuff I was spitballing about earlier, about, say, for instance, log analytics or something. If you've got something that can basically say, pick up an error that's cropped up in some logs, or a service has failed, or something's gone wrong, if you can automatically run a workflow or kick off a process, and then that hit an AI agent that is able to decide, what do we do with this? What is this error message? Is it something we've seen before? Is it something we understand? Is it something we know how to remediate? That as an opportunity, that as a thing, I think just becomes really, really powerful. Like, that's just a huge thing that you can just start automating things in a way that they weren't automated before. We've always had to sort of structure things, and we've always had to bake it and understand, okay, it's got this error message with this error code. We'll go do this. You don't need to do that anymore. You can just have a database of known fixes and known issues, and as long as it can action those things, it can go do it.
That's okay. Okay. Thank you for saying it. I worked with somebody in the past who built something along the lines of what you're describing, for sort of an infrastructure system, like like an SRE or a DevOps type person that would orchestrate certain things or automate certain things based on, and using some sort of model would have it interpret something like an output or a message of some kind and reply back and tell you what it was. But the thing that I think I was missing at the time, or I was missing to connect the dots here, is what you just described as that agent, or in the place of having an agent there that understands and can reason out by looking at some other set of information and come back and say, based on what I saw, it's this. Here's what we're going to go do on behalf, rather than what you just said, which is what has to happen now is right. Here's all the different error codes. Here's what happens in each one, and basically have to figure out what's all the possible multiverses of things that could happen here, and then incorporate that somehow and write all of that out. You almost, I won't say that's like a silver bullet. Like, you just don't have to do that anymore. I mean, it's not unicorns and rainbows, but it can get you a lot closer to that potential place of like, I just hand it to this agent and it just tells me this, or tells the user this is what this thing is at that point in your app, and it could potentially even remediate or take the next step or initiate another workflow or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
So that, and if you separate that into two components, right? One is interacting with the world. These LLMs and the more modern models, they're helping you do a much better job of being able to interact with them in natural language and respond back to you in natural language, obviously, right? So they make a lot of the world more accessible to you because they are able to help you interact with it in natural language. That interactivity model, the capability, is one aspect of it. The other one is how much knowledge they incorporate within the model, and how much thinking and reasoning ability they bring to bear in terms of how it works out. Because we have been doing NLP for a while now. I remember back when Markov chains were all the rage, we were still using those things. What we have now is significantly better than what was in use, say, 25 years ago. But it's still, that aspect of it is that as everything improves, this has improved too. Uh, the natural language understanding, processing, and so on is one aspect of it. But what you do with all that intent information that you have identified, that has changed much more dramatically. Now you are able to capture the intent, reason about it inside a model much better. There's a much bigger world. The size of the models are insanely exponentially bigger these days compared to even like 5-6 years ago. The number of parameters in each of these large models is so high that not only are you able to interact with them better, but you're able to find a semblance of reason and so on within them. And there are specific models and techniques which do reasoning also much better than other models.
Yeah. I've actually been noticing in the last couple of days, and I use ChatGPT a fair amount. I bounce between it and a few of the others as well. But I've been noticing that, not even moving to their latest model, but kind of latest as in like a month ago, latest, whatever it is, that it's starting to put together when I ask a detailed question about something or to write something out for me or what have you. I'm starting to get, it's taking a little bit longer, but I see those things saying reasoning, and it's like processing. It might give me a summary, and then 15 seconds later it says it reasoned for 30 seconds or whatever it was. You reasoned for some number of seconds, and then here's a detailed answer. I'm like, you know what? That's okay. I'm realizing I don't need the answer like that. I'm actually very interested to understand separately from this conversation, for that, for this stream's sake, like what is actually happening there? What's it doing? How is it putting that together? But to your point, Ram, there's so much more that it can, data points it can sort through and things it can find. It's really fascinating. Dan, you mentioned the project you've been kind of working on, this chatbot. Is there anything you want to kind of show a little bit to kind of give a sense of like what it actually does, or do you want to kind of just talk
Yeah.
through it a little bit more?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, it's quite simplistic. It's not like um, anything particularly dramatic. It was basically driven by a thought exercise that one of the things that really kind of struck me when I was experimenting with some of the this frameworks and tools for agentic AI, and one of the things that really struck me was the scalability of those tools and capabilities was becoming a bit of a rub, right? It was easy to set up a hello world. It was easy to set up a tool and getting it to get a weather forecast or integrate it with something. But I was getting frustrated with the extending that and managing that extensibility and managing all of that integration with different things and different processes and whatnot. So what I wanted to do was kind of bring the strengths of the workflow engine to the AI. So not only can the workflow potentially talk to the AI, get the AI to do something, but the AI can talk to Conductor and ask Conductor to do things for it, basically, and say, I need this. Can you go do this for me? So yeah, I've got a really simple demo. If I share my screen, don't know if you guys can see that.
Yep, looking good.
Cool. So basically, it's a very simple. It's just a Streamlit app that I've put together, and what it's just demonstrating is that if I ask it some questions, if I just say to it, my name's Dan. So it's basically just talking to an AI, and that's just the AI responding. Okay, that's just a normal chatbot conversation. Excuse the fact that my Streamlit app is a little bit broken, but that's just my Python skills are not the best. But it's pretty straightforward. But if I ask it to get the weather. If I just run that. So you can see it's come back with the weather forecast. If we have a look over here, it's actually run a workflow for us, which has done that activity. So rather than the AI and the bot having that capability built into it, it's actually just gone off to Conductor and said, what workflows have we got that can do this job for me? And I've basically given it a select set of workflows. So I've exposed some workflows to it and said, right, these things do this. And it can then make that call to Conductor and say, okay, run that thing for me. Go get me this weather. Go get me this weather forecast. So, from a scalability and manageability perspective, right, that means it's nicely decoupled. It means you've got all the failure retry logic and all of those sorts of good things. But it also gives you something that's really, I think, extensible. So we, we do another one. So ask it to tell me a joke about cats, because always why not cats? So say, Jane, why did the cat cross the road to get to the other side? It's a pretty terrible joke, to be honest. But if we have a look there again, so it's run a workflow here. This is a very different type of workflow. It's just using a piece of JavaScript to basically put together the joke just from some text. We can see the inputs that are being passed into it. We can see the result that's coming out of that as well. So yeah, it's like I said, fairly simplistic, but the idea here is to say that AI can be extended, I think, in a way that I think is, like I said, like I was saying earlier, really powerful. If this thing can basically say, I'm going to run some workflows to figure out how to solve a problem. And it could be a collection of workflows. It could be I'm going to go off and get some data on this. I'm going to get some data on another point, and build up some data before I generate that answer. A bit like, what you're saying about it was thinking and reasoning about these things, bringing that concretized context to it. and giving it the capability to make those decisions about what it needs to look up, I think gives some really, really powerful opportunities.
Ron, what
I'll
are your
stop
thoughts
sharing.
on? Sorry, no, you could leave it up. Ron, what are your thoughts on
Oh,
something like this? Yeah, if you don't mind, Dan, leaving that up for a minute.
yeah,
No,
sure,
this
no
is
worries.
beautiful. So the like pretty much all frameworks and libraries available for you to build agents with help you build something like this. And like take Pydantic AI for example, a lovely tool. I love it. Uh,
Yeah,
the or LangChain, Crew AI. There are so many nice options out there. We should try as many of them as possible. Stick with what works. And when you do run into some issues, file an issue with them, help them develop their tool, but also explore options like Conductor, which give you a solution right now, right? So this is amazing. I love this. And so if we break this down into two parts, right? Let's talk about this for a minute. When you're asking for a specific tool, uh, when your query is about a specific tool, you're able to go hunt and find that particular tool, have it execute for you, right? So now, if you're able to infer that from the query that it's exactly one tool, one thing that it needs to do, get it done, that's nice, right? Well built, structured. Now, what if the query gets more complex? What if the
mm,
query involves multiple tools or tools that you have not configured with your detection system or your execution system? Uh, how are we going to
yeah,
handle those cases? Those will be nice things to extend this into further as you get time to work on it more.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think the definitely, I think the next thing I'm really kind of wanting to experiment with is having multiple calls um, playing into that into that sort of kind of sequence. So like using this silly example, asking it to tell me a joke about the weather in Exeter, or something like that, where it needs to go get the weather and then needs to construct the joke. Um, it's kind of bringing all of those different bits and pieces, because I think that's where the strength is the it being able to understand what it is that's being asked of it, what it's
Mm,
being presented with, and make that reasoning to say I'm going to go pull these different bits and pieces together, and although it's quite simplistic here, um, it's able to, I'm not directly mapping these things. I can add another workflow now and it will automatically just be able to pick that up and just work with it. As long as it can understand what that workflow is for, it's fine. It can interpret that, and
mm,
it's that interpretation and that sort of ability to understand or reason what's being asked. I think just yeah, it's so cool. Um, and yeah, I think the SDKs and the libraries. There's some amazing libraries out there. We've done we I've been experimenting with some stuff and messing around with some things and whatnot. I think where we like I was saying, where we kind of got to was we wanted it to kind of branch out. We were like, well, how can we get this to do this over here and this bit over here, and kind of manage those relationships and not tightly couple things, and that type of stuff. Yeah.
yeah, this is cool. So, oh, um,
No,
Jeff,
go, Ron,
were
go
you
ahead. No,
saying?
nope, go right ahead.
Uh, no. I was saying this is cool. And so, Dan, I have a question for you. So, as you build this, would you consider this chatbot an agent?
um I would. It's very limited at the moment, because it can only do one thing at a time, right?
Mm,
I think for me, for it to be, it can take an action on a user's behalf, right? So it kind of ticks the first box. I suppose, for to a degree. But I think really, for me, that an agent should be something that can do multiple things. It needs to be able to do a few different things inside of that context. So, you know, let's say, I wanted it to find out the weather when I go on holiday next, right? It being able to go look at my calendar, find out when I'm next on holiday, and then go look up the weather for those dates, right?
Yeah.
It's being able to say, make those kind of distinctions and stuff. I think that's probably more where I'd say that it's more of an agent.
Yeah.
And like I was saying earlier, I think the chatbot interface it's cool, it's nice, it's a nice way of kind of seeing it and understanding it. But I think it also kind of draws a boundary in our minds about where the potentials sit. I definitely could see it doing more. I think as a concept, being able to say, let's say for instance in a workflow, it gets to a stage where it hits that agentic AI, and that AI is then able to go, okay, what workflows and what things can I do to, action this, to deal with this, or to investigate it, or triage, or whatever, research it, or what other activities come in.
Dan, you saying that, and I'm sorry to cut you off. I completely see your point about how the in this one example, how the chat bot sort of gives you the idea, but also might limit some people to kind of go, oh, what this is about is a chatbot, and that's clearly not. Well, I shouldn't say clearly, but based on this stream, like you're making it very clear to us at least that that's not really what this is. But I also like the idea of having that because it kind of I was trying to think of a couple ways to describe it. And one of them was like if you have been around brewing or distilling at all, when you walk in, you like to have the mash tun or something. It's a big metal container, but there's a window at the top, usually to look in to make sure that things are happening the way it needs to happen. But you only see this much. Or if you walk by a manufacturing plant, if you work at a manufacturing plant and there's all the lines, you're not going to just walk right onto the floor. There's usually like a hallway with windows that look in, so supervisors can see what's happening, and you can kind of see a snapshot of what's happening in a part of it, but you're not getting a sense of what all is happening out there. And I think in this situation, or in general, the idea of having these sorts of tools, like a simple chatbot, can give people a window of insight into like the art of the possible. What could be possible if you put some time into it? But also to caveat with people who are learning these things that is not the sum total. It's not a zero sum game. This is not the sum total of what it can do. This is just we gave this to you so you get a sense of how powerful this can actually be if we bundled it into a small little space for you.
Yeah. And I think chatbots are still really, really powerful, really useful. If in the business, with users, if they're able to ask questions of the AI, and the AI is able to go, okay, here's a bunch of different things I can do, loads of different workflows it can execute to go answer that question. That's potentially a huge, possibility. You can ask questions about what's the usage looking like, where are we on this process, where is this thing, what's happening with this this piece of data publication, or can you look this up for me? I think there's just so many things that in the business it could be really, really powerful to easily integrate into for a dev team to easily integrate into something like a chatbot or an AI or whatever. I think kind of bringing all those different components together is where the exciting stuff starts happening. That you kind of becomes a bit of a force multiplier.
I remember talking, Ram, and I want to give you a chance to kind of jump back in here before the end of the stream as well. I was talking to one of our other architects at Orkes, his name is Haven, in one of our previous streams, and we kind of went down this path, not about AI, but the idea of business process modeling and all that. And the reason I bring up that specific topic, just to kind of keep it short, is what you just described, like the ability for almost giving everyone at the company, so to speak, a common language or a common way to understand what's happening by ask a chatbot, as an example, that can go out or has agents that are looking at all these different systems and can reply back and give you a human understandable response saying, you are seeing a problem here in this process you're running. Well, I can tell you that there are 3 other things that are occurring that are actually slowing this down, or whatever the situation is. But it would give that person a better way, or a way to have the right nomenclature to go talk to others, rather than the joking kind of thing in the past, like the network's down. It's like this. Oh, it's not the network. Like this joke that, or like just go talk to the dev. I don't want to talk to you. Like those things are silly and they're fun to talk about. Of course, we joke about them, but something like the concepts you're leading us into, or the idea that you can simplify a lot of that, because you can have these agents that, or potentially have agents that are understanding what these different systems are doing, and can let someone know, hey, I put that data together for you, and I can tell you in more understandable language or verbiage, this is what's actually happening. And then they can have better conversations internally, or just a leader can look at something and say, how is something happening for me today? And it can put a bunch of things together to say, because it understands these 3 systems work together. Here's what you're actually trying to know, this revenue output, or whatever the data is you're really wanting to understand, which I think is just so powerful.
Yeah.
Quick point I want to make before I forget. So something Dan said earlier is like a very beautiful way of describing what we are up to. Also, is if the agent or if the tool can figure out the workflow needed to accomplish the task, to fulfill that request, then it would be more agentic, right? So
Yeah.
and that's where the world is going, to world of AI models and so on. Many of these code generating models, you ask it to write this game for me, and it will generate the complete Python code for that game, which involves very complex logic and multiple steps of reasoning involved. And similarly, you could envision asking it to do something with a given bunch of tools, and it figuring out how to call them and in what order to call them for a particular outcome. That's exactly what a workflow does. So essentially, it's constructing a workflow for you, setting it up, and a workflow engine should help you run that properly too.
Well, listen, guys, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate everyone who's watching, or if you're catching this on TM Replay afterwards, love to have any comments or questions. You're more than welcome to put those in the comments below the video, and we will get back to you. Ram and Dan, thank you both very much. Any final thoughts you want to leave out there before we wrap up?
No, it was a great conversation. Really, really interesting. Some really interesting thoughts and ideas. Yeah. I've got probably now starting to brew a new list of mischief that I need to start working on.
Love it. Awesome. Ram, how about you?
Yes. Oh yeah, definitely. This was a good conversation. Thanks, Jeff and Dan. And like I said earlier, I would encourage everyone to try playing with available frameworks, see what they like, help those projects out, file issues, also explore Conductor as a workflow engine for all those projects. We are always here to help you along the way. Uh, fire an email or message our way, and we can get started with that.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you both. And I'm glad you led me into that, Ram. So thanks both for being here. Really appreciate it. And as we wrap up, just wanted to throw out a couple notes for you. If you want to go play with Conductor, Orkes Conductor specifically, which would be the enterprise edition with all the really cool AI stuff we have built in already for you, you can just scan this QR. It's on this side. Yeah, the QR code that's on the left side of my screen, or your right side, my left. You can scan that QR code right now to get to our developer playground, or our developer edition. I should update that text. Or you can just go to orkes.io and click the really big cool button that says start for free. It'll take you into that developer edition, which is a sandbox for you. You can spend a lot of time doing that. And if open source is your jam and you want to spend some time checking out Conductor open source, first off, we have our Conductor open source foundation page. You can see right here below me, which is just conductor-oss.org, where you'll find our docs and all kinds of cool stuff there ready to go, along with links to our Slack and Discourse and other parts of the community. And you can also go to our GitHub repo, which is right here below my screen. It's github.com/conductor-oss/conductor. And you go there, you'll find the actual repo. You can clone it, spin it up really quickly. We would love it if you left us a star. It really does help kind of build things up. And back up here for just a sec. If you go to our open source foundation page, I didn't bring this up on my screen to show you, but right at the upper right corner is a big, pretty blue button that says Get Involved. If you would like to become more involved, you can jump into Slack, you can jump in Discourse, do what Ron mentioned earlier, where you go through and either file issues or submit PRs. But if you just want to have someone kind of reach out and give you a sense of things that you could be doing, how you can contribute, whether you have plenty of time or not a lot of time, but you do want to get more involved, click that Get Involved button. You get a little window, a couple bits of information. We'll reach out to you, and we'll guide you from there. So without further ado, just wanted to say thank you all for being here. Sincerely appreciate it. Enjoy the stream, and we will see you next time.